This is the story of a battle that shaped the future of Europe, pitching the Knights Hospitaller who were defending their tiny Christian kingdom against the mighty Muslim Ottoman Empire. A David and Goliath struggle in which the Ottomans were expected to seize Malta from the Knights Hospitaller. It's a story of bloody war fought without compromise, where the faith of both sides inspired them to courage and terrible atrocities, and neither backed down as the death toll mounted because there was too much to lose. For the Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, this tiny little island of Malta stood in the way of him dominating the whole of Europe. He had known nothing but victory for years. Why should Malta stand in his way? His implacable foe was the tough and courageous French nobleman Jean de Valletta. He had been made Grand Master of the Knights of Malta. This was the successor organisation to the Knights Hospitaller, who had lost in the Holy Land, had retreated to Cyprus and then Rhodes, and had finally been driven back to the shores of Malta. Suleiman and his Ottoman Empire now embarked on the Siege of Malta, an event that would shape Europe for centuries. De Valletta called it a clash between the Cross and the Quran. He said, "A formidable army of infidels are on the point of invading our island." Suleiman responded that this cursed island was like a barrier interposed between him and his possessions. The whole of Europe was on tenterhooks. Could the Knights Hospitaller stand in the way and stop the invincible Ottoman Empire? As Queen Elizabeth I of England wrote, "If the Turks should prevail against the Isle of Malta, who knows what further peril shall come against the whole of Christendom?" The Knights had known only retreat in recent years from the Holy Land to Cyprus, to Rhodes just a few years before, and then to Malta. Now they were going to have to turn things around. A century earlier, the Ottomans had taken the city of Constantinople and destroyed the 1,000-year-old Christian Byzantine Empire. They now controlled the whole of the Eastern Mediterranean. Christian Europe's fight back at the time included attacks on Ottoman-controlled Greece and the seizure of the city of Tunis with a massacre of 30,000 people. Suleiman was not going to take this lying down. He was bent on revenge. The means of revenge was a frightening warrior called Dragut, also known as the Drawn Sword of Islam. He combined naval commander with piracy. He was incredibly intelligent, he was ruthless, and he was cunning. In the lead up to the siege, Dragut landed on the neighbouring island of Gozo, also controlled by the Knights Hospitaller, and he carried off thousands of people, almost the entire population, into slavery, men, women and children who were then sold like animals in the marketplaces of North Africa. This was a massive humiliation for the Knights Hospitaller. They were now on full alert and began fortifying the main island of Malta, and this included rebuilding the fortress of St. Elmo, which I visited this year. And in fact, its walls were so thick and impregnable, it was even used in the Second World War by British forces. Malta could not be allowed to fall. The Spanish Empire, which was the superpower of the time, controlled southern Italy and Sicily, and it realised that if Malta fell, that would be a stepping stone for the Ottomans into its territory. By 1565, spies in Constantinople the Ottoman capital, who were working for de Valletta, told him an invasion was imminent. The Ottoman fleet that headed towards Malta was the biggest naval attack force that had been seen since the Roman Empire. De Valletta hastily gathered resources into the fortresses, including Fort St. Elmo, and then poisoned all the wells with dead animals. And then the siege got underway, and what a bloody siege it was. A bombardment of the Knights Hospitaller by the Ottoman forces, which were superior in terms of numbers and in terms of armaments. The Knights were initially overwhelmed by the Ottoman forces, and Fort St. Elmo was bombarded. The Knights held out for as long as they could, but eventually the Ottomans got into the fortress and massacred Knights in this chapel which I visited. They were slaughtered in front of the altar, and then their bodies decapitated, nailed to crucifixes, and floated in the bay. A furious de Valletta responded by beheading Turkish prisoners and then firing their heads into the Ottoman camp. Things were looking pretty hopeless for the Knights Hospitaller, but then events began to move in their direction. First of all, Dragut was killed, and secondly, Christian forces allied to the Knights Hospitaller finally arrived. That included the Spanish Empire, the Papal States, the Duchy of Florence and of Savoy and Genoa. Christian Europe had finally got its act together. The Knights had lost a third of their number, but the Ottomans had seen 35,000 of their soldiers killed. This was too much for the Sultan, and he ordered a withdrawal. A grateful Christendom filled the coffers of the Knights Hospitaller, and de Valletta set about building a new capital city, which he rather immodestly named after himself, Valletta. You can still visit it today, with its sumptuous cathedral with the graves of Grand Masters of the Knights. And you can still see the huge thick walls that de Valletta built around his city, just in case you know who might return. You've been watching Templar Knight TV. Do remember to subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you again soon.